name is Francesco Rampa. I am the program manager of the Food Security Program at the European Centre for Development Policy Management, ECDPM, which is a Dutch foundation, or as we prefer to call ourselves, Think and Do Tank. In fact, we are a bit like FANRPAN in Europe. Our mandate is to facilitate the relationship between European Union member states and institutions and African member states and institutions. It was founded in '86, and it works along different thematic areas, including now recently food security. For a long time we have facilitated the relationships, especially between regional economic communities and European institutions in terms of aid management, trade relations, political dialogue, and we work with a number of stakeholders. So we are our aim is also to make sure that the different policy processes include important stakeholders. For example, in the CAADP, that all the multi-actor partnership is there with the farmers, etc., and doesn't remain closed into a government-to-government relationship. A couple of years ago, we were requested by a number of institutions in Africa, including NEPAD and the African Union Commission, to start entering the area of CAADP. And when we needed a local partner, of course, because ECDPM is a relatively small institution, and it can give the European, of course, perspective and networks, but we need always to partner and do things with our African counterparts. And by looking around, of course, FANRPAN was the first come into our minds as a like-minded partner. Yes, we are working mostly on the regional dimensions of CAADP, because ECDPM has a long experience in working with regional economic communities in Africa on their own regional integration processes, which are mostly about trade, and what this means for their economic and trade relations with Europe. And for many years we followed, in particular, the negotiations on free trade agreements between Europe and the different regions, ECOWAS, COMESA, SADC. And after many years of working in this area, these institutions requested that we start supporting and facilitating the relationship of the donors and European stakeholders, in particular on the preparation of the regional CAADP compacts. You know that CAADP has, of course, two dimensions, national and regional, and national is going pretty well, whereas the regional economic communities, only ECOWAS signed an investment plan and a compact. And so we are assisting, in particular, what is called the Development Partner Task Team, which is the group of donors assisting CAADP. A lot of the donors, of course, are European, and we facilitate their relationship when it comes to the preparation of the regional compacts with the regional economic communities secretariats, NPCA, and the African Union Commission. So we follow all of these processes. We produce analysis on where the different regions stand. We put all our publications on our websites. Sometimes it is large publications, and of course these are very complex issues, but we also, of course, summarize them in policy briefs. Or we have a number of tools, communication tools, like the Great Insights, which is a bi-monthly publication. Or we have the WECO newsletter, which every week informs all European stakeholders on what's happening in development. And so we also give particular updates on the regional CAADP process. First of all, I would say that I can understand from a government point of view, or from a national stakeholder, including farmers' organization, that there is, of course, an urge to first conclude the national CAADP compact. So in many policy processes, trade and regional issues are seen a bit as distant from the immediate needs of people, but the more countries and stakeholders were entering into these national preparations, they realized that a lot of what is important for food security as a regional dimension, including being able to sell produce from the surplus area to the deficit areas. There are a lot of trade barriers. In Africa, there's a lot of transboundary water resources that need to be better managed together by neighbors. So this as an objective has been understood fully, but of course it is complex to bring together all of the stakeholders. Sometimes countries do not agree with one another. The process of CAADP itself didn't focus a lot, and so the resources to be spent on the regional dimensions were less. So it's an issue of priority and complexity, I would say, of managing together. Regional cooperation is difficult even in Europe after 60 years of integration, so for certain of these regions it is early. But ECOWAS showed the way, and I think now the others, in 2012, the other regions, especially the COMESA, SADC and the Eastern African Community, are really now making stronger steps towards that. It is probably seen like this to some extent. So the perception maybe of some of the stakeholders in Africa is also that indeed there may be an issue of competing allocation. But in reality, when you look at the structure of the funding for CAADP, it is also devoted to the regional economic communities. And most of the regional economic communities have actually secured child trust funds, which are parts of the large multi-donor trust fund. And as part of the child trust funds, they can allocate both for preparations at the national level and at the regional level. So I think that apart from the Eastern African Community, most of the other regions do have resources at the level of the Secretariat to also implement the regional. So indeed, this shouldn't be a problem to kickstart the process at least. One other aspect, of course, is when it comes to really investing into food security action and policy. So in terms of preparations, it shouldn't be a problem. Of course, when you say that you want to invest in the preparation of market information system, or you really want to bridge, to build a bridge between two countries, or you want to set up a natural resources management system, those are really multi-million investment, and in that area we are at an early stage. So it is true that also the donors have already contributed and are contributing to the national investment plans, but we are not at the level of commitment already into certain donors in their own priorities have a regional action for food security. So they are planning in this very moment to invest more in that area across, for example, agriculture and trade, what is called aid for trade. So the issue is making the connection, because often also in Europe, those who program these resources I'm talking about, like aid for trade, they sit in a separate unit than those working on CAADP, and they don't speak to each other. So now our challenge, which is also what we are trying to facilitate together with FANRPAN and ECDPM, is making sure that these bridges are built and that the people speak to one another in the ministries of trade, in the Ministry of Agriculture in Africa, but also in the donor level. So by bringing together these people, we synergize the different sectors, hopefully, and that's where the resources also that are there for infrastructure development or aid for trade will make sure that they are fully aligned with the regional compact. That's a bit the general direction we are taking with a number of actors, and also the African Union Commission, NEPAD, the REX, they agree that this is where we have to aim at. Well, first of all, there is our role in a way is to be critical, because we are an independent organization, and we are an independent broker. So we also have to reality check sometimes on the CAADP process. I am the first to say that compared to other programs and movements of the past, CAADP has a lot of ownership. It really gathers political attention from African leaders. It is improving in certain countries in particular, so I am fully behind the process, but we have to make sure that we also maintain a critical view. In that sense, for example, when countries announce or regions announce that they are progressing at the regional level, that's where we come in and go to certain countries. I've been many times to South Africa, for example, to ask the stakeholders in South Africa, are you really interested? Why aren't you making a move towards that? And in that sense, our role is to bring up the voice of those who say, also, look, you have to be gradual and you have to time properly the different steps. And we first want to make sure that our CAADP at the national level is concluded, and then we will work towards national. So we do interact with the stakeholders for reality check. Then in specific regions, we are requested for specific input, for example, in terms of analysis. For example, in the SADC region, in the Southern Africa region, we are trying to understand together with FANRPAN how the corridor movement and this infrastructure corridor can be better aligned to the CAADP. And so we are conducting interviews, including in South Africa, Mozambique, Tanzania, to ask the small farmers, the parliamentarians, are you involved in CAADP? Do you think that the existing processes like CAADP or infrastructure development are helping you? So we do interact with a number of stakeholders. We invite them to the dialogue. For example, if we have meetings with donors, we connect also by telephone some of these national farmers organizations to get their voice heard, so that the donors don't jump into maybe a phase of policy development and investment at the regional level without having understood what are the concerns on the national level. So in that sense, we interact with countries. I think the value of these meetings is always networking, which is, of course, the overall one of the overall goals of FANRPAN, and also my organization is to connecting people. So for us, it is important to highlight some of the findings of our analysis, bring here the publications, discuss some of the findings with the people who are in the rooms, ask difficult questions. Hopefully, we always are after frank discussions. So in that sense, to me, the networking and the further building of partnership is very important. I met a lot of interesting people I hadn't met before from the FANRPAN nodes, for example, or for the private sector, and they are very important for our work. Secondly, it is important to see the level of involvement of certain leaders, and I was very impressed, of course, by the President Kikwete and his really knowledge of the topics. So I really also came here to understand to what extent the SAGCOT, which is this corridor they are planning in Tanzania as part of the CAADP movement, to what extent it is a reality and not just something you see on the website. And that I have started to really understand a number of issues, including the full backing of the highest political level. So I would say that these two elements for us are very important for the next steps. One of the reasons for me to come was also the specific focus of the policy dialogue this year, the youth and youth involvement. Now, it's a multidimensional issue, but at ECDPM, one of the things we are doing, and not directly my team, but ECDPM together with other European research centers, is the preparation of the European Report on Development for 2013, funded by the European Commission. And that is a first step to start identifying what could be the post-MDG framework. So what will the international community decide the global development targets to be once the existing Millennium Development Goals sort of expires in 2015. How did we do on the MDGs is of course important, but what's next? And so in that sense, we were thinking that probably, given the importance of the youth, there may be need for one specific international target on youth involvement in the productive sector in particular, and therefore agriculture, because the MDGs are very important, but they focus mostly on primary of course, needs, basic water access, basic sanitation, HIV/AIDS. But of course, there is very little today on the productive sector, investment, trade. And of course, the youth in the whole world, I would say, are very crucial to sustain development, really, also from the productive point of view. So I was also here to get views and get a feeling of what are the needs and the demands of the youth, and whether they agree on the fact that probably it's worth having a new international goal after 2015. So I was also here to get views, and I interviewed a number of people, so that was also interesting to me. It really depends on the countries and the continents. In general, Asia, of course, has done very well, apart from particular hotspots in poverty that remains in certain parts of India or countries like Bangladesh. But in general, Asia has done very well. Africa has done well on a number of MDGs. In certain MDGs, including the reduction of women or mother death, certain aspects of HIV/AIDS are more under control, but in general, certain parts of Africa are still lagging behind on a number of issues, and there's still a lot to be done, certainly. So it's a mixed picture, I would say. That would be the general agreement on this.